Heroes of Spain take us all over Spain and all over the world because Spanish wines really started to blossom and bloom in the late 1990s when we saw some explosion of interest and developments happening, and some great brands came to the forefront, and some big names got involved, and none bigger than the winemaker I'm talking to right now, who's standing at about 6 o'clock in the morning in Barossa Valley, Australia. This is Chris Ringland, and he is a legend in the world of winemaking, 100-point wines made around the world. And so such an honor to be able to speak with you today.
No, thank you, Ian. It's always good to be able to tell the stories about what we do.
Awesome. Well, I am curious about how did you get involved with making old vine Grenache in Spain?
I've been, well, since I graduated from wine school, University of Adelaide, back in the early 80s. I've been doing various winemaking jobs, and I wound up working in the Barossa Valley in the mid 80s, and wound up for 18 years being the winemaker at Rockford Winery in the Barossa. And during that period, Rockford became an extremely important part of the development of the modern era of Barossa Valley, and in particular Barossa Valley Shiraz. And on the back of the success of Rockford, and also, to my amazement, the fact that the proprietor of the business, my boss, allowed me to make my own little parcel of wine as a little sideline job, and that I named that Three Rivers. And that wine started to develop an international reputation, even though it was only made in tiny amounts, only ever 2 barrels.
Wow.
I was approached in in around 2000 by a gentleman named Jorge Adonio, who had established an extremely successful import company into the United States for Spanish wine. And, Spanish wine was really starting to gain a new momentum in the United States in the early 2000s. And Jorge had seen what was going on with my winemaking in the Barossa Valley, and invited me to come over and travel around Spain with him, with a view to establishing some new and exciting winemaking projects. And I was young enough and energetic enough to go, this is a fantastic opportunity. Let's get into it. And on the back of this period of evaluating vineyards, meeting with people, I met with Jose Miguel San Martin and the people at Bodegas Bolsayo, and we established a plan to create Bodegas Alto Moncayo. And I'm delighted to say we are now about to embark on our 23rd vintage. So it worked.
It's fantastic. Yeah, this is up in northern Spain, Campo de Borja, not too far away from Rioja, um, but it's home to some amazing vine material. When you got there and you saw these sites, were you looking at like old abandoned vineyard land, or what was happening back then?
It's a very interesting period in the re-evaluation of what Spain can do. Jorge Ordonez was very visionary in realizing this needed to be captured, and new momentum was developing. The vineyards were all in beautiful condition. And you'd understand, mate. We've gone from a period where everybody thought Spain was Rioja, Ribera del Duero, maybe Cava, and Sherry, to all of a sudden the discovery of these other regions of Spain, which were really, during that period, considered outliers, maybe second tier, maybe only known locally. So, of course, climatically, northern Spain and southern Australia have almost identical climate. So from my point of view, arriving there and looking around the beautiful old Garnacha vineyards in the the Aragona, Campo de Borja sub-region, it was struck me as it was just as simply a how do we put it, a no-brainer. This was going to be an extraordinarily exciting prospect, an extraordinary project. And the great thing about it was all based on the vineyards. You know, you can't make great wine for the long term and develop a style and a reputation without the fundamental foundation being absolutely impeccable. And the thing that I brought to the party was the winemaking approach that I was using in the Barossa Valley and that I'd been taught, which was keep all the vineyards separate, keep all the ferments very small, shallow little open ferments, very gentle handling, very gentle basket pressing, old-fashioned winemaking technique, and then finishing the wine in impeccable new oak barrels. And essentially, my job was to set up. For the first few vintages, we actually made the wine in a little almond packing shed in Bulbuente. They cleared this almond packing shed out, and we just the actual fermenters we were in such under a bit of a time pressure to get this bodega up and happening and get the first wine production happening in the vintage of 2002 that I actually had the fermenters made in the Barossa Valley, packed into shipping containers. And then I was also wanting them to utilize some very good locally made barrels, AP John Cooper. And these barrels are American oak, but the oak is sourced and then seasoned in the Barossa Valley. The barrels are constructed. And so then, of course, we actually worked out to fill the stainless steel fermenters with the barrels and ship them all to Bilbao in one go. And the reason I wanted to use these barrels was because I wanted this project, to have a unique barrel supply that no one else was using in fact, in this stage in the Northern Hemisphere. And it has turned out, of course, extremely effective.
That's amazing. And a good, thread or through line between your project in Australia and your project in Spain. That's pretty cool. Um,
I mean, I must admit, mate, I look back at it and go, I was driven, a little bit audacious, and I look back now and go, wow, we all got it, and it worked. It's a real delight.
and that container made it in time. Got there.
Absolutely. And of course, I was spending a lot of time back at those early establishment years. I was traveling to Spain 5 times a year to
Wow.
work with the guys. I was there for the vintage, of course, evaluating the vineyards, and then, of course, tasting the wines and working in particular with Jose Luis Cuenca, who was, of course, not only the chief enologo that I was working with, but also he was the chief enologo for Bodegas por Sale. And Jose Miguel Samartan's son, Miguel, then subsequently took over the day-to-day winemaking and management of the bodega. And as you can see there from the bodega, that is the one that we actually constructed on the road to El Bust, on the outskirts of Campo de Boja. And of course, that's that's the home of the winemaking now.
And now, how much wine are you making at Alto Moncayo?
Um, it's not a lot. The actual volume has not changed that much right from inception. More or less, it's somewhere between around 100 and 120 tons of grapes. I tend to prefer to think of it more in terms of the actual number of vineyards that contribute. And there are just around 50 individual vineyards which contribute to the assemblage for the three wines that we produce at Alto Moncayo. Interestingly, the initial brief for the project was to create two wines, the main wine, Alto Moncayo, and then a very special top barrel selection called Aquilon. Very interestingly, the second vintage of the project, 2003, the weather was terrible. It rained, and we had lots of disease pressure with the garnacha. And on the back of that, I elected for some of the wines from certain vineyards not to get oak maturation, but to be stored in stainless steel tanks so that we could evaluate them. And on the back of the way those wines evolved, we decided to create Veraton. And of course, it's so important when you're developing a new project, maybe to have a big climatic vintage change thrown at you so you can actually rapidly get an understanding of the seasonal variations that you're going to encounter and the versatility that you need in order to create a consistent expression of wines from a particular region.
Amazing. I did some math there, Chris. About 6,000 cases is a good number.
It more or less, some years I'm actually a little bit strict when it comes to the actual allocation and classification of the wines.
Right.
But whenever I'm evaluating, and by the way, I do actually all of the evaluation now of the various barrel groups to create the blend planning here in South Australia. The samples are all flown to South Australia in triplicate, turns into quite a big pallet of wine that arrives. I have these massive oak tables at my residence on my vineyard here, and I basically set up a massive tasting. And my job is to classify each of the barrel groups and work out which of the three wines various individual vineyards are going to contribute. And then, of course, at the Spanish end, Jose Luis and Miguel are also evaluating the wines. And between us, we're working out a confluence of classifications and plans.
Absolutely at the top of the food chain too. These are some of the more highly sought after Grenache wines of in Spain, and you can probably start to say the world because you've got Grenache really becoming a major variety. The Grenache hunters are out there looking in the Rhone Valley, considering your wines and going to other uh, key parts of the world. I would say, are you seeing Grenache start to take a bigger stage in Australia as well?
Absolutely. This has been such an interesting evolution. Grenache was always a foundation grape that was grown in South Australia right from the early establishment of the vineyards in the 1880s. And it's very interesting to think about why the pioneers of grape growing chose this grape. It's a very versatile grape. And of course, for the most of the time in South Australia, during that the historical history of Grenache, it was used to make fortified wine. It was also used to make spirit, and it was a very versatile grape in terms of some years when sparkling wine was very much in demand. Growers were rescued by wineries buying their Grenache and using it to make white base wine for sparkling.
Mhm.
Grenache didn't start to become taken seriously in the Barossa until the late 80s, early 90s. And in fact, at Rockford, we were pioneers of making Grenache. Everyone thought we were crazy. And of course, Garnacha in Aragona, Campo de Borja, is the foundation. You could call it an indigenous grape, even though, of course, we know that it would have been introduced to Spain by the Phoenician traders probably north of 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But the Garnacha of Aragona is the Garnacha of the rest of the world. And we have to thank King Alfonso III of Aragona in the around the mid 700s, who decreed that grape would be transferred and planted in his territories around the Mediterranean. So we have King Alfonso to thank for the fact that the Garnacha is grown in the south of France, also on the western coast of Italy, and of course on the islands of the Mediterranean. So interestingly, as a young winemaker, for me, Grenache was completely associated with the Rhone. It was all about Cote de Rhone, and it was so interesting that it, all of a sudden we rediscovered the home of Garnacha in Aragona and Campo de Borja. For me, working with these vineyards and knowing that the provenance of these grapes and the selection of these grapes has been going on for more than 3,000 years.
Hmm.
It's as a winemaker and as, of course, personally as a grape grower, it's humbling but also wonderful to be part of the ongoing process.
Spectacular. The wine that we're tasting tonight received 93 points by Vinuis. Intensely perfumed, spice tinged black and blue fruits, vanilla, candied flowers, cola on the nose, along with a smoky element that builds with air. Broad and fleshy on entry, offering juicy cherry cola, blueberry, and mocha flavors, sharpened by a jolt of spicy white pepper. Strongly echoes the blue fruit and spice notes on a very long focus finish with features lingering floral and mineral flourishes.
I think it's an excellent, the tasting description there is an excellent overview of the way that wine presents. I just would like to remind everyone that 2018 is a spectacularly good vintage in Spain. We've had some very good vintages. I tasted a bottle of the 18 Alto Moncayo last week. And I suppose I'd just like to explain to people, we're not mucking around here. We make strong wines. We make wines that are not only for high impact, immediate enjoyment, but they will mature in your cellar for decades. Can I explain that early in the piece, when I was developing my working relationship with Jose Miguel and Jose Luis, Jose Luis took me into his father's bodega, that's an underground cellar in Tabuenca. And his father was the winemaker at the Tabuenca Cooperative during the 1960s and 70s. And as part of our development of what we wanted to do, Jose Luis opened bottles of the garnacha that his dad had made that was stored in this underground bodega. And so we were drinking late 60s garnacha that was in incredibly fine condition and had matured beautifully. And we knew exactly what we wanted to do. These are big, impressive, powerful wines, and I'm not making any excuses there. For example, if you open a Veraton, please do a bit of planning and give it a good decant, and maybe think about not actually enjoying it with the people you're going to drink it with for a few hours, because it will evolve incredibly. And this is the amazing thing about Garnacha. The selection of these particular grapes going down to individual villages throughout the comfortable region means that. And also, I should remind you that hope I'm not scooting around too much, but Moncayo, and there's a lovely picture of the mountain, of course, behind the bodega in that shot of the bodega. It's a volcano. And so we've got a very strong influence in the high altitude vineyards around Tabuenca of volcanic soils. We've got pink slate, and then we have the medium altitude, and so the vineyards that are in the area actually in the area immediately around the bodega, they're the vineyards of the Borja region itself, and then there are other vineyards located further to the north on the edges of the Ebro River Valley around Pozuelo. Now, these are more limestone influenced and alluvial soils. So with the vineyards in these different subregions that we use to create Bodega Salto Moncayo, our job is to create ingredients. Each of those individual vineyards and those individually vinified wines is making a specific contribution to the overall complexity of the assemblage. And it's great to be able to actually, in an interview like this, Ian, to be able to explain to people, the detail that goes in to creating one of these wines.
Spectacular. But
Yeah,
have a great vintage, and we'll look forward to reading all about it.
thank you very much, Ian. Been great to talk to you.
Be well, man. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.